Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Safe Software's webinar, Improving Data Exchange with GE Smallworld using our FME product. Today, our presenters are myself, Mark Stokes. I'm the manager of our professional services team here at Safe Software. And with me, I've got Steve McCabe, who's one of our product specialists. I've also got Dan Eisminger, who's here to help us answer some of our questions. For those of you that haven't had the pleasure of meeting us, Safe Software, we're a private company here in Vancouver, BC, Canada, actually in one of Vancouver's suburbs in Surrey. There's about just under 100 of us here at SAFE, and we've got lots of customers overseas, scattered around lots of different countries. A lot of our sales are done through our value-added resellers and systems integrators who are also scattered around overseas. In North America, we mostly support our customers out of here in Vancouver. So our webinar today is going to be about 60 minutes. We're going to cover an introduction to FME Desktop working with Smallworld products. I'm also going to give you an introduction to FME Server, and then interspersed through all of that, I'm going to give you a series of demos that hopefully illustrate how FME Desktop can help you with your Smallworld interoperability problems. Steve and Dan are online to answer your questions. To submit a question, just go to the GoToWebinar panel, and on the attendee control panel, click the dash beside the questions to expand the question pane, and then you can type your question and click send. Sometimes we are flooded with questions and we don't get to them all during the webinar, so if we don't get to your question during the session today, we will follow up with an email so that you get your questions answered. So do fire away, and please be patient, and like I say, if we don't get to you, we will follow up later on. So just to recap, we're going to do an overview of FME technology with the FME Desktop and a quick introduction to FME Server. I've got a few demonstrations planned, exporting Smallworld data to CAD products, bringing CAD data into Smallworld, and doing some data validation on the way in. We can look at some GIS exports to Google Earth, look at some data replication with between Smallworld, and we can replicate SQL Server or Oracle Spatial or Esri geodatabase products, and have a look at FME Server and how that can integrate with the Smallworld products. Our goal here at Safe Software is to allow our customers to achieve total data, spatial data mastery, and we hope that the FME Desktop product in particular allows you to get there and enable you to do your data translations and transformations, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So just in the utilities space, and I know there's probably others out there that are not totally focused on utilities, maybe some telecoms people. We support a wide range of formats, and just some examples of those in the utility space are obviously GE Smallworld itself, Oracle Spatial, Esri geodatabase, and enhancements to that, the Telvent ArcFM, which sits on top of geodatabase, Intergraph G Technology, Bentley Electric, and then some of the legacy formats like Intergraph Frame and the old Vision product. We also support a wide range of the CAD formats like AutoCAD and Bentley MicroStation, and then a wide range of other sort of more ancillary kind of formats, multi-speak, XML, and we're working on supporting Sim XML at the moment as well, and many other flavors of XML as well, for particularly in the European area, where a lot of the national mapping agencies are distributing their data in XML products. FME is certainly supporting those. The FME technology capabilities allow us to do a wide range of transformations, and that's sort of in two parts. We've got the actual idea of translating between formats, and we support well over 200 formats now in FME 2011. And within that, we also have a wide range of transformation tools, 300 plus data transformation tools in our FME desktop product. The reason that transformation is such an important part of the actual translation is because within the spatial realm, we have different sort of flavors of spatial data. CAD and GIS are just two examples of that, where the view of the world from the CAD point of view is more about drawings and layout and so on. And although that is changing, of course. But within the GIS world, data validation, complete data, and data analysis and network analysis are the more important. So data consistency in the GIS is one of the key points. So when you move data between those two platforms, GIS and CAD, say Smallworld to AutoCAD, you have to sort of change the way that people view that data, and so that's really where the key part of the transformation is. In FME 2011, we've added more tools as well to deal with XML and GML. And we also added point cloud or LiDAR support in FME 2011. So those of you that are interested in those technologies can also investigate FME, and we just recently gave a webinar on LiDAR data, so you would be able to follow up on that. So a key part of the data translation, once you've chosen what formats you need to move between, say, Smallworld and AutoCAD, is the transformation process. And that is really about transforming the schema. Schema is front and center in FME. So realigning the attributes, realigning the table names, going from a GIS table structure to, say, the national CAD standard in the US with different layer names as illustrated on the right here. And the data restructuring in FME can take place on the feature types, which represent the tables or layers, depending on the format you're working in. The attribute names, so renaming attributes, removing private attributes as you export to CAD products or to a public database. Working with enumerated lists or domains and remapping the domain codes to domain values. And also restructuring the geometry, which is a very important part, particularly for the Smallworld users, and we're going to be looking at that just now. So knowing your geometry model is critical, and the Smallworld environment does pose problems for people who need to get their data to other platforms, and that's because of Smallworld's rich geometry model. In Smallworld, you can have multiple geometries on each Smallworld object, and most GIS platforms and CAD platforms don't sort of support that kind of geometry model. And so what we have to do often is to split up the Smallworld objects so that they each only have one single geometry on the GIS on the features, so that they can be ingested by other CAD or GIS products. There are exceptions to this, and an example would be if you're doing data replication between Smallworld and SQL Server or Oracle Spatial, where those databases can have multiple geometry columns on their databases. and in which case we want to preserve the multiple geometry structure of the small world object. So in most cases we can do both of those, depending on whether you're moving the data between in a sort of a replication mode or trying to get the data out to a GIS or CAD system that does not support the multiple geometry approach. So one of the key parts of the data transformation that FME offers is working with those complex geometries. And so what I'm going to do is bring up one of the FME desktop applications, which is the Universal Viewer, and just try and illustrate what that looks like. So here I've got a view of the Smallworld Cambridge database, and what I'm illustrating here is how FME can split up the geometries into the constituent parts. So if we just sort of zoom in on a corner of this area here, what we've got is the ubiquitous Smallworld Cambridge database. And here I've got supply points. And in the Smallworld data model, those supply points are multiple or complex geometries, and they consist of the location of the supply point and the annotation. And here you can see I've only got one geometry because I've split it up, and then my text or my annotation has been split out as a second geometry and a second feature, and that's sitting there as a separate entity. So if you were moving this data from Smallworld into, say, Esri geodatabase, that's what you'd need to be able to do, be able to split up the complex Smallworld features into single geometry representations, and then that annotation and the Smallworld supply point location can go into separate feature classes in the geodatabase. Looking at a different view of that data is the multiple geometry view, and so again, if I just zoom in here, a slightly different view of the data with some of the more background data. And then if I select one of these supply point entities here, and you can see I've selected the electricity supply point up here, what we've got now is a more complex geometry structure within FME. And we can see here that the number of geometries on this feature is 2, and I've got both at the top here the location geometry coming out of Smallworld, and that's its coordinate there. You can see the little red cross come up on the screen, and scrolling down here we can see that the next geometry is the label, and that's the location of the label over there. And so that's how FME can take this data, if you needed to, into SQL Server, Oracle Spatial, kind of in a sort of a more data replication mode, and load up the multiple spatial columns in those databases. So there's quite a lot of flexibility there in the way that FME can handle those complex geometries in Smallworld. And the key part of the whole thing is knowing which approach you have to take depending on the format that you're writing out. Of course, the converse is true as well. If we're loading data into Smallworld, we need to be able to build those multiple geometry structures and load that information into Smallworld. And I think I'm going to try and illustrate that a little later on. So for those of you that aren't familiar with SAFE, we've got 2 core products in the SAFE family, FME Desktop and FME Server. I'm going to spend most of the session on FME Desktop, and then a little later on just introduce FME Server and point out how it might help some of your Smallworld applications. So starting off with FME Desktop, but before we go any further, I think to keep everybody smiling and happy, we've got a few polls here in our session. So Steve is going to bring up a poll. What have you got for us, Steve?
Yeah, the first poll here is pretty simple for everybody. Are you currently using FME, and if so, which version? So we've got a selection there, 2012, right down to the earlier versions below 2009. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer those. You got 50% votes in. Looks like a lot of people, 41% are currently using FME 2011. 80%. All right, I'll give you another 10 seconds on that.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to close that now.
Can we see the results?
So there's the results.
Well, that's pretty good. So we've got quite a few FME users out there. A few people who aren't who are new to FME, so that's fine. A few people hanging on to older versions, so hopefully we can convince you to move forward with the newer versions today. Okay. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Okay, so there are FME Desktop Components. Most of you now are obviously familiar with that. The key part of our FME Desktop is the Workbench, which is our graphical user interface for building these data transformation. We add a reader and a writer, and they get represented as the tables, or we call them feature types, in the FME workspace. And then we can lay down different data transformation tools to manipulate the data as it flows through the data pipeline. So Workbench is a graphical authoring environment for data restructuring. It's a simple point and click. I think one of the things that our users find hardest with FME Desktop is finding the transformation tools that they need to do a particular task, and we're working hard at that to try and make that easier for you, and adding sort of more learning tools to the suite of things. And I've already introduced you to the FME Universal Viewer. We do have a second viewer in the works called Data Inspector, and if you have FME 2011, you'll see that on the Start menu. It's still a work in progress, but if you ever have to look at 3D data, Data Inspector is better at handling 3D information. But in most cases, users look at FME Universal Viewer. So what is FME Universal Viewer? Well, it's better to say what it's not, actually. It's not a GIS tool, and it's not a data editor, but it does allow us to look at data from the way that FME sees it, and it allows you to compare your source data, which might be Smallworld, for example, with the exported translation results. It also allows you to dig right into the data that you're looking at, and you might be working or be asked to export data to AutoCAD, but you might not have the AutoCAD application available to you. So FME Viewer will let you look at that AutoCAD data, but as you can see on the right here in the panel, we also dig out a lot of the gory details of that particular format, the underlying format attributes, we call them. So if we've selected text or a cable, we get the line type and all the other information about that particular feature. So the FME Universal Viewer is a useful tool for sort of digging right into the underlying data. One of the more difficult parts or confusing parts for our users for Smallworld is that there are two readers and writers available to you. Here at SAFE, we don't actually develop the Smallworld reader and writer ourselves. Spatial Business Systems have put together a reader and writer for Smallworld, and we have a long working relationship with GE Smallworld, and they have also produced a series of readers and writers. The GE folks are currently actively working on their reader and writer, and they have a roadmap that they published at the last Smallworld User Conference, North America User Conference. They're hoping to, I believe they're releasing that new reader and writer or upgraded reader and writer for Smallworld 4 in September. There's a lot of overlap between those reader and writers, and I would suggest that you talk to us or Smallworld directory or spatial biz to find out which reader or writer might be more suitable for your needs. I'm going to be illustrating both readers and writers on and off through the demos. In addition, the GE folks have developed a Smallworld SOM for FME that expands the format reach of the Smallworld SOM. I'm not going to be demonstrating that today, but if you want a little demo of that, Smallworld guru Alfred Sawatsky has put together a little video of how to use the SOM, and that's on his Smallworld Watch blog. Well, we've got another poll question here for everybody, Steve. So what are we going to ask up next?
All right. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so what version of Smallworld reader-writer are you using? So we've got the GE Smallworld 3 and 4 versions, as well as Spatial Biz. And then maybe you don't know what you're using, or you're not using anything. So I'll give you a little bit of time there to answer that. Got 60% of the votes in now. Okay, just another 5 or 10 seconds on that, and I'll close it. Okay, I'm going to close that now. There's the results, Mark.
Okay, so a lot of people have come through with the GE Smallworld reader. A few people using the Spatial Biz one. A few people not using. A third of us not. Nearly a third of us not using Smallworld reader writers at all, and a couple of people don't really know which version they have, and so they can ask us how to figure that out if they really want to.
All right.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Okay, so that's an introduction to the desktop products, and so let's go into a couple of demos and have a look at some of the tools in FME for moving data backwards and forwards. So we're going to have a quick look at exporting data to CAD, bringing CAD data back into Smallworld. So round tripping between Smallworld and CAD products is a relatively common task of our users, where people are extracting Smallworld data into a CAD product, people doing design work or other kind of layouts in the CAD, and then bringing that data back in. And then I've got a little data replication example that we can have a quick look at as well. So in terms of exporting to CAD, I'm just going to open up our FME Workbench application. And here it is. I've already added a reader to this workspace. In this case, it's the GE Smallworld reader and writer that I brought up. And I've cleaned it up a little bit, and I've just selected a few of the objects that are available in the Cambridge database there. I have created this workspace using the split geometry mode. So here we can see that I've got a feature type, which is the supply point location here. And so that name is derived from the name of the object, supply point, and then appended to that is the geometry name of that particular feature that we're creating here in the workbench. And similarly, we've got a supply point here, which has got the label appended to it. So that's the geometry name of the annotation on that particular supply point. So going out to CAD, what we're going to do is, first of all, we need to add a CAD writer to FME. So under the writer menu, we can just go add writer. Using the quick type, I can just type in DWG and select one of the AutoCAD formats I want to work with. Set up a output directory in the ubiquitous temp, and let's overwrite the electric network. Under the parameters, what I'm going to do is select an AutoCAD, of course it always goes to the wrong directory. I'm going to select a AutoCAD template file, and that template file really gives FME a look at some header information which defines block names, layer names, colors, and so on. So it sort of gives us some definitions that we can work with. And so we're going to add that, and I'm not going to create any feature types. And then in this case here, I'm just going to select all the source feature types that I'm working with. I think that's all of them. Yep. And then I'm just going to say duplicate that on the writer. So now FME is creating some destination feature types which represent the layers in the AutoCAD data, and it's just replicated the attributes that came in on the source data, depending on how many there are. In this case, they're going to go into AutoCAD object data on the outside, on the output side. So what we need to do here is in FME 2011, I think we added some additional tools for trying to beautify your AutoCAD data, and so that's a transformer we can add. So just clicking on the screen, the canvas here, and starting to type, we get the quick add facility, and I'm going to add a DWG styler to my canvas. Because I clicked on a link there, it inserted it automatically for me. And then the DWG styler allows me to add some things in here. So let's select a color for the thing here, choose a horrible purple or something. And then here I've got the AutoCAD template file already selected. And so what I'm going to do is I want to symbolize this, so I don't need areas or text. And I'm going to add a block from the list of blocks that have been defined in that template file. So I want to pick a joint symbol. And then probably need to scale this a little bit just to make them visible for the purposes of this demo, so we'll increase that. And so I can go through here in a number of places and add some DWG stylers to help us improve the look and feel of that AutoCAD data. So we're going to set up something for the supply point, and again choose a block from the template file that we have there, rescale that a little bit, and we don't need those in this case, so we just turn those off. And then on the supply point labels, we might need to increase the size there, and on the cable, let's have a look at the cable. We'll set a nice line type for that. So where's my cable? There it is. And here under the line type, again from the list of line types we have in the AutoCAD template file, we can choose a particular line type to work with there, and we can change the scaling of that line and other things as well. Okay, and then in FME, if we just run that translation, get a prompt for where we want to write that out to. Hopefully my Smallworld server is still up and running. Didn't look like that on the output side. So what did we do wrong there? Check the table name column. Yeah. And so I've probably got table names that are too long here. So what I'm going to do is just reduce the table name length. And actually, instead of sending the labels to a separate layer, we'll do that. So yeah, there are limits to the length of a name that we can have in the AutoCAD, so we just need to adjust those table names. Always good to see lots of red text coming across your FME wall. And then in the FME Universal Viewer, we can right-click on any of the feature types and select Visualize, and that will bring up in the Universal Viewer the output that we've just created, and we can have a look at it in that case there. Okay? So there's a very simple example of moving data out of the Smallworld GIS into a CAD product. Obviously, we could work at that a little bit more, fine-tune the text sizes and so on, and add additional Smallworld objects if we wanted to. Okay? So the next example that I've got here is doing the reverse, is going from some CAD data back into a Smallworld database. And so this illustrates quite a few parts of the whole process within FME. So I'm going to open up the workspace. I'm not going to sit and build that workspace here. What I'm doing is I'm reloading some of that electrical data from a source data set, and if I right-click on a source feature type, what I need to be able to do is, first of all, select that data set, which I'll do in a second. One of the interesting things here is for the supply points. Those supply points have associated with them a customer. So we're doing that join here in that workspace. So what we're doing is we're reading from the electrical data, and within my AutoCAD file that I had previously created, I've got the customer information attached to the supply point. And so I'm splitting the data out here. Some of that data I'm sending off to the supply point as a label, and I'm creating a label for it, and then merging that data back together so I have a supply point which has both the annotation and the location of the supply point. I'm making a copy of that supply point which also has some customer information on it, and I'm loading the customer table. And then I'm loading the intermediate join table within the Smallworld database to make that join between the customer and the supply point. So that just sort of illustrates there how we can take the Smallworld data, make those complex geometries within Smallworld, and also do some of the joins within Smallworld. And in this case, I'm using the Spatial Biz reader and writer. I'm also doing some data validation. So on the cable data here, I've got some data transformation that's doing the data validation. Within FME, we've got a tool called the Geometry OGC Validator. So that validates Smallworld data based on the OGC rules for sample data, for geometry data. I'm doing some checks on attributes. And then if that validation fails, I'm writing out a little bit of HTML as an HTML text report. If the validation passes, going back here, I load that data into the cable object on the Smallworld database, and also write out a report saying how many features we were successful with. So here's the translation parameters. If I run this thing, I'm going to go and choose some sample data. So I've got some source DWT. So let's see what that looks like if I load some bad data in here, some data that's got some invalid geometries in my AutoCAD perhaps, and some geometries that might twist or not conform very well. And the important thing is here is that it's much harder to control the CAD users, so they makes it easier for them to make mistakes because they don't have specific layers or objects that they are forced to add particular data into. So in this case here, the data failed the validation. So we've got a whole bunch of feature counts going through here through my data validation tools, and it's written out a little HTML report, which I have here, I think. So if I bring up a browser and drag that report in there, we should see a little table of invalid data, and I'm adding little messages here that tell us what's wrong with that data. I can add the ID and so on if I want, or any other information that will help identify where that feature is, so that I can go back to my CAD file and correct it. And then if I have corrected that data, we can run this thing and load the data into Smallworld. Now what the Spatial Biz writer is offering us is the ability to load that data into an alternative that we can check and then post it up to the top. And so that alternative, I've called it the FME alternative. So there we have, we've got 7 features that are new in this AutoCAD file that I'm posting up to the top here, up to the Smallworld database. And so if I go to the version management in Smallworld, and I need to refresh that, we'll see that we've created that FME alternative. If I click on that now and then go to my GIS, what we'll see is that the new features down here have been added to my Smallworld database. And let's have a look at some of these guys to see what they offer us. So here we can see that we've added the supply point, and we've made the join to one of the customers there, which will be Safe Software in this case. And we've added a proposed cable along here and the connectors and so on in there. So you can see that the workspace is a little bit more complex there, but we're doing 2 fairly distinctive tasks in that example, loading the CAD data, doing data validation on it, and then if it passes the validation, actually getting it into Smallworld, doing the joins on some of the tables, and creating an alternative where that data can sit so that we can review the data if we need to. And then lastly, in the little FME Desktop kind of demos is a simple example of doing some data replication. We've got customers replicating to SQL Server, Oracle Spatial, and I should have added here on my slide the Esri geodatabase. We have a lot of people working between Smallworld and Esri products. Data replication is kind of pretty common for people who are well, there's a wide number of reasons we're doing data replication between databases. Particularly with the Esri tools, we find that some customers have their facility data in Smallworld, and then they do their land-based management in Esri products, and they want to share the data between both. So they are moving the land-based data back into Smallworld and then taking the facilities data and moving it into GeoDatabase. SQL Server and Oracle Spatial support the multiple geometry structures in the same way that Smallworld, so we can do straight across replication there. So let's have a quick look at a workspace here. And so this is a workspace which is preserving the multiple spatial columns from Smallworld into SQL Server in this case. And this functionality has sort of been just added to FME 2011. The key part here is that on the SQL Server writer, and it would be the same on the Oracle writer, is that we have a flag that says that we want to handle multiple spatial columns. And on the Smallworld reader, you'll see that we haven't split out the Smallworld objects by geometry in this case. So we have the cable, the joint, and supply point, and for example, the supply point has 2 geometries on it, location and annotation. and we're keeping that structure on the features and moving it across into SQL Server. So I've set this up so that instead of writing to SQL Server, actually it'll pop up the results in FME Universal Viewer so that we can see what those multiple spatial columns look like. I'm reading from an alternative in the Smallworld database, writing out to my SQL Server. It's going to pop up the intermediate results in FME Universal Viewer. And so here what we can see is actually by reading from that alternative, the Spatial Biz Region Writer has selected the objects in the Smallworld VMDS that have changed, and we can click on those in here and see that see what has changed. And in this case here, a special attribute on FME has been set, the FME DB operation. So it's telling us that that is a deleted feature in the Smallworld VMDS, and over here we've got a feature that's being updated, and I think that's most of the rest of them are updates. So we've got one feature that's a delete and a few that are updates. And so when we using this FME DB operation, when we write into SQL Server, the SQL Server writer will recognize that particular operation and do that, whether it's a delete, update, or an insert on the SQL Server side. And so we can just very straightforwardly do incremental updates from our Smallworld to our SQL Server database. And that would actually apply as well to our Oracle Spatial writer and, in fact, our Geodatabase writer as well. So a relatively simple workspace can be used to do incremental updates to the different databases that FME supports. Okay, so just moving on a little bit. So it's going to take the last few minutes of the webinar to have a quick look at and introduce FME Server to people, to everybody. We've got another poll here for Steve to run.
Yeah, I'm just going to launch it here now. So it's a pretty simple question, so I'll just give you a few seconds to answer this one. Is your organization currently using FME Server? We got 50% of the votes in. All right, just another couple more seconds and I'll hand it back to Mark here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that now and we'll share the results. There you go, Mark.
Okay, so most of us are not yet using FME Server, so we'll have a quick look at that. We've got a few people that are using FME Server with in and around the Smallworld context, so that's great. A couple of people don't know whether they've implemented the server in their organization, which actually probably isn't surprising because some of your organizations are large and sprawling, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, I guess, but that's fine too. So FME Server is a scalable platform that offers different ways for you to run the workspaces that you've authored through FME Desktop. So they're very, very closely tied together. It's basically has a bunch of services that give you different access points or different approaches to running your workspaces. The important thing is that it uses the same FME engine that powers the FME desktop, so everything that you run on your desktop can be run on the server, and allows you to transform and share your spatial data through these different web services. So just to illustrate how FME Server works, what we might have is in an organization is a group of FME gurus who like to author these complex or straightforward workspaces depending on what you're doing. And then somewhere you have an FME server set up, and those FME desktop users can publish their workspaces up to the server. And then if they want to, they can run them there and offload the work from their desktop. But in addition, what we have is a wide range of different services that allow other people who don't have FME installed to run those workspaces and access them in different ways. There's also a maintenance cycle for your workspaces. Workspaces evolve over time like any other kind of project. People add new objects to the database or whatever. And so we need to be able to get those workspaces back to the desktop, maintain them, and then republish them up to the server again. So FME Server can be used in a wide variety of ways, data distribution or data download service. So this would be an example of a GIS to CAD. You might, rather than having a GIS technician run CAD requests on their desktop, you might open up your environment so that people can self-serve their CAD data and so you can give a developer access to some of your facility data so they can go off and design a new subdivision, for example. You might want to give people more access to the data in a live context, like streaming up through KML on a Google Earth so that they can get a very simple view of certain aspects of your facility data. And then the CAD to GIS upload and validation would be an example where you could have a web page where people could submit their AutoCAD drawings and you could run a validation service, and if it validates, load the data into your database. And we could also just run through the job submitter service, run data transformations sort of within your own intranet and offload large translations from your desktop to the FME server. So here's a simple, well not so simple actually, a nice example of the city of Surrey here where we are using FME server. They're not using this against Smallworld, I've got to say, but often what we see is the integrations of FME server with different web mapping tools, and we haven't had time here to set up a new SciAS environment, but we have given a couple of workshops in the past where we've integrated FME server with SciAS as a web mapping environment. So if we go to this website, the City of Surrey, what it allows us to do is obviously to zoom in on a particular area somewhere around our offices, and then we can choose which particular themes that we want to download, and in this case they're just allowing us to choose a couple of formats, AutoCAD or Esri shapefiles, and then if I enter my email address here, and or what I can do is draw a box to select a query location, and so I'll only get the data within that box. I can download the data, and what will happen in this particular case is that I'll get an email back with a link on it to the City of Surrey FTP site, and that will have an AutoCAD file waiting with the themes that I have selected in that web environment. So just so that's an example of somebody who's implemented FME server in a live area, and we've got lots of users that have done that. The actual FME server product itself, so it goes, if I can find a web browser here, that one I think, that we ship with the web pages that we ship with FME server as defaults are much simpler. So most of the work in implementing FME server is branding the web pages and including your own web mapping tools. So we've got a couple of examples here. I've got the Smallworld examples that I've been running already. And so, for example, here we've got the AutoCAD data validation and data loader. I can configure that. I've got to go in as the author. I can upload some files, so it's asking me to browse for some files that I want to work with. Looks like I've lost my network connection. There we go. And go and find those AutoCAD files that we were looking at earlier. So this is exactly the same workspace that we were running earlier on. And if I run this particular one, I'm going to choose that file as the one, upload the file. Then I'm going to choose that file as the one I want to run. And it's going to upload that. So it's uploaded that to the server, and then when I run this, it's going to run that workspace, do the validation that we were doing earlier on, and hopefully return the report on whether this was valid data or invalid data. So it's just waiting for my server to wake up there, because we're running everything on the same desktop here. And so there's that same HTML validation report streamed back to us through FME Server. And I could run the good data through. I'd get a little report back that says your data has loaded successfully, and you could download it. So other examples of data streaming are a network validation workspace that I've got here. So again, I can configure that. It's got the simple prompt, what does the valid network look like to us? If I run that, it's doing an extract from the Smallworld database, doing a validation with one of our network validation tools in the FME workspace, and I can stream that up to Google Earth. And this could be either a Google Earth data streaming or through a network link. And so in this case here, it's giving me a simple view of that Cambridge data network, and the purple ones are kind of pieces of the network that don't appear to be connected to the main network here. And so we can have somebody do a quick check of some of the data that they're working with to make sure that the GIS is got the correct connectivity in there. And so all of these different services allow different users different ways of accessing the workspaces that we've authored on the FME desktop, and they can then run those and get the results back in the way that's most either data download, data streaming, or for jobs. Somebody has tapped into our phone line and is interrupting us a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, so what's next here? We've got a, if you want a personalized demo of anything that we've shown today, just let us know. Send in a request to info@faith.com. You can download a copy of FME Desktop. And we've also got several upcoming webinars, and if you go to our website, you'll see the webinars that are coming along, and also we record all of these webinars, and you can have a look at recordings of the webinars. Okay, Steve, we've got one last poll, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, we sure do. So, would you be interested in FME for Smallworld online training? And so we have a selection there. If you're interested, let us know. I'll leave that up there.
And obviously, focusing that training on the different readers and writers that you have might be important. Yeah, let us know whether online training would help. Our online training is usually done for about 4 hours in the morning, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some look at that. Okay, how are we doing there?
Yeah, we got about 60% of the people who voted. So just give you a few more seconds on that, and then we'll close it here. Okay, I've hit my number, so closing that. Thanks everyone for submitting. Now I'll share it.
Okay, so quite a few people would like. So what we'd need to do would get our marketing people to send out a bit more information about what might be included in the training. So about a third of you might be interested that you get more information. And obviously the numbers there reflect who's using which particular reader and writer. So that's great. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Okay, so we've got 4 minutes to the end of the seminar, the webinar here. So have we had any interesting questions come up through the Q&A that might want to share with the group as a whole?
Yeah, I've collected some of the ones that have come through that either I'm not able to answer and you might be able to provide information on. So we can just let Mark digest those.
Okay, yeah. So it's FME, a question about FME Smallworld Edition. Yeah, when you purchase the different readers and writers, the Spatial Biz or Smallworld, they do come in sort of slightly different packages. So if you've purchased the FME Smallworld Edition, with that you get the GE Smallworld reader and writer. If you purchase the Spatial Biz reader and writer for Smallworld, what you actually purchase is an FME Oracle Edition with the Spatial Business plugin. So slightly different approaches to purchasing the different readers and writers for Smallworld.
Okay, thanks for that one, Mark.
Okay, so one down here, is there a file limit size to importing GML into Smallworld? Theoretically not. We could probably read almost any size of GML, but GML is a highly bloated format, and so when you're importing very, very large data sets, you may hit some resource issues in depending on what you have to do to restructure the GML data to get it into Smallworld. So really that would just be a bit of experimentation, but in theory there shouldn't be any limit on the size of a GML file that we can read. Is the workbench definition dependent on what FME import plugin is used in Smallworld? Yes, it is. So, but it's very easy to switch. So if you wanted to move between one of the Smallworld readers and writers and another, from the GE one to the Spatial Biz one or vice versa, then the workspaces are slightly different, but it would be very easy to switch the workspace so that it could deal with one or the other.
All right, thanks again for that, Mark.
Then a request, can we share these workspaces that in the demo that we've given for participants to study? I don't see any reason why we can't do that, and so we'll figure out how we can do that, maybe do that in the follow-up email. So that should be good too. And then one more here that I've got is, can you use the schema mapper with Smallworld readers and writers? I haven't illustrated the schema mapper here. It's one of our more complex transformers for doing sort of really hefty schema mapping from one data model to another. And yes, you can use the schema mapper within this context of Smallworld to something else, particularly good for data replication or for going out to a CAD package that's got some well-defined standard. We've got lots on Schema Mapper on some of the resources that we have, which are available in FME.
Yeah, there's still some questions coming in, so you people online keep putting them in there. We'll try to answer them, and any that we don't get back to you, we will touch base with you after the webinar has ended. All right, Mark, thanks very much for that.
So just in summary, what we've seen today, we've had a quick look at FME Desktop, had a look at the FME Workbench and some of the transformation tools for doing different kinds of data translation, CAD to GIS, GIS to CAD, data replication. Had a quick overview of FME Server. Quite a few of you not yet found a use for FME Server or perhaps don't know about it. Had a look at a couple of different services in FME Server and the way that you can run FME workspaces that you've authored on the desktop and on the server. Didn't really talk too much about the scalability of the server, but that's one of its strengths, is that it allows you to scale up and short translations than may be possible on your desktop environment. So thanks a lot for attending. We're 1 minute over, which is pretty good for our webinars. I think our marketing people will be jolly happy with that. So the webinar is recorded and will be available online. We'll send you everybody who's attended, a follow-up email with those links to the recording and any of the other information, maybe links to some of the workspaces that we've been using here in the webinar. If you want more information, do send a note to info@safe.com, questions about different readers and writers or licensing models or FME Server. If you have specific product-related questions, please always hit up support@safe.com. And for those of you who haven't experimented with our wiki on FMEpedia, has got a lot of FAQs and interesting examples, particularly on different ways of exploring FME Server. So feel free to explore that a little bit as well. So from myself and Steve and Dan Eisminger, the Iceman over here, who's been madly answering questions, thank you very much for attending, everybody. And like I say, don't hesitate to contact us if you've got any questions about anything that we've been illustrating today. Thank you very much.
Take care.